Okay, today I'm talking to you about the expanding dark forest and generative AI. A little context first. This is me, I'm Maggie, I look like this on the web. For some context of why I'm up here, I'm a design engineer at a research agency called Normally, and I design and build exploratory AI prototypes for my job, and I've been working as a product designer engineer in AI for 3 years now, which isn't long, but in the time span of AI, it's like forever. Clicker's working, great. Second, I'm what we call very online, which means I have lived on Twitter for like the last 10 years of my life. Sadly, it's kind of going down. And I write a lot online on a personal blog, and I hang out with a lot of people who do the same. And this, for me, has been a really overwhelmingly positive experience, being a sincere human on the web and meeting many real friends that way, people who I've ended up meeting up with in real life, becoming true best buddies with. And I really want others to have that experience in the future. Little housekeeping here. This QR code will take you to all my slides and notes and references, so anything you see in the talk, don't feel like you have to take photos of it. Scan this, it'll take you there. I've done quite a few versions of this talk, so the one on there is longer. You're getting a slightly abridged version today, but just as good. And I'll show the skin at the end. So this is going to be about writing on the web, trust, and human relationships, so like small fish. And obviously, AI. Usually, I'm the only AI speaker at conferences I do, but this one, there's a little pressure off. I don't have to apologize as much for being the AI speaker. It's specifically about AI slop. So slop is a new term, but it's becoming pretty widely used, and it's essentially the AI equivalent of spam. So something counts as slop if it's AI-generated content that is unhelpful, unwanted, and thrust upon someone who doesn't want it. You may have noticed the web filling up with a lot of this stuff lately. In the beginning, we started noticing the telltale phrase, as an AI language model, showing up all over the place on like Amazon reviews and Yelp and Facebook and LinkedIn posts, and most were like very boring attempts to get ChatGPT to write engaging LinkedIn content. Twitter reply sections have started to look like this. It's sort of bots replying en masse to content with different versions of the same sentence. Things like, oh, incredible graphics, engaging storyline, immersive. Or, congratulations on your remarkable success. Or like, congratulations on a job well done. And some aren't very good at hiding the formulas that they were written with. Journalists love now to report on the flood of AI slop that is taking over the web. The New York Times keeps doing pieces about it. A NewsGuard report came out earlier this year that found there were 49 like completely AI-generated news sites that were ranking really highly on Google, all publishing misinformation. Vox found recently this fall that there's all this like inspirational pumpkin-themed content showing up on Pinterest and Twitter and getting hundreds of thousands of likes and bringing in lots of money, but all AI-generated. Wired's been reporting just earlier this week on the fact that Medium is being flooded with AI-generated content. They found over 47% of recently published articles were AI-generated, to which the owner of Medium said, well, it doesn't matter if no one reads it. Okay. And of course, with the recent election, politicians have both been using AI slop against their opponents and then complaining that their opponents are using it, so we can tell who did that. And it's starting to get ridiculous. So this is a fake AI restaurant that says it is in Austin, Texas. It's got, over 80,000 followers on Instagram, and it frequently posts about things like its menu changes or photos from its staff parties, except it doesn't exist, and it's very unlikely they really serve this foot pizza or moo dang croissant. Although impressive, if true. There's also been a surge in self-published books on Amazon. So the New York Times did a report on how the travel guidebook category in particular has been flooded with generated crap. They looked at a whole bunch of recently published books and found that the authors of these travel books were completely made-up people, generated profile images, generated bios, and they definitely haven't been to these countries. And in response, Amazon has started limiting the number of self-published books per day to 3. So you're going to have to slow down on writing that book. Facebook is like a whole different story. A paper published back in March by 2 Stanford researchers looked at AI-generated slop and found there were hundreds of generative content farms on the platform. These pictures of AI-generated children all have millions of engagements or more, despite being very obviously fake to anyone who's seen AI-generated images before. And we've learned that if there's one thing boomers on Facebook love, it's children making things and Jesus. So here's a generated AI child making a rather unbelievable Jesus sand sculpture that has over 11,000 engagements and 300 comments. Another AI-generated child in a slum who's made a Coca-Cola Jesus, which is very entrepreneurial of him. Spirit of capitalism is alive and well. And again, thousands of engagements, hundreds of comments. And finally, I cannot explain what this is or why, but this crab Jesus has over 200,000 engagements and 4,000 comments. I mean, I'm sure many from bots, but still. And there are many other much more disturbing examples that I couldn't stomach to put in this presentation. So all of these examples point to the fact that the cost of creating and publishing to the web just dropped to almost zero. Compared to humans, generative AI models are cheaper, easier, and faster at making engaging content. They can produce infinite amounts of click-worthy stuff that gathers thousands or millions of views, and hence, in our current web economy, earns you a lot of money. Most of the examples I've showed are extremely unsophisticated AI-generated slop. This is all bot-generated nonsense with bots reacting to it. We'll probably be able to filter out and ignore the vast majority of this low-quality stuff. But I'm much more worried about the more sophisticated versions that we can't easily detect. Because AI-generated slop won't be this dumb forever. We're starting to develop more sophisticated ways of building with language models. Like we just heard, agent architectures are becoming very popular. So this is when we give language models access to tools like web search and code execution and long-term memory with databases. And we have them use techniques like self-critique or chain of thought in our prompts to make them do more complex long-term tasks. And agent architectures mean we're entering a stage where we're going to be sharing the web with a lot of very capable non-human agents. They're going to be very different to our current bots, and they have a lot more data about how realistic humans behave. They're rapidly going to get more and more skilled at producing more compelling, click-worthy content that generates money. And we won't be able to tell the difference between them and real humans. Now, why is this a problem? I'm sorry, some of my slides have gotten cut off from the typography. I'm only going to focus on how this will affect human relationships and information quality on the web. Anything else, like how we all might end up unemployed or dead soon, is like beyond my pay grade. Because I think this is all going to expand the dark forest of the web. That's cut off, sorry. OK, so what is the dark forest of the web? This is an idea originally proposed by Yancey Strickler in 2019 that points out that the modern web has become a very unfriendly place for humans. It's a little bit like a dark forest at night. It seems eerily quiet because all the living creatures are hiding out of sight. They know that if they come out or make noise, the predators will come eat them, so they hide away in the shadows. And in this case, the living creatures are humans trying to use the web to authentically connect with one another, and the predators are the people trying to use the web to make money, get attention, and manipulate one another, as well as the angry, judgmental Twitter mobs who will come after you if you say slightly the wrong thing. If you look around at the public spaces of the web, like Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, you will find they're overrun with ads and clickbait and bots and predatory behavior from insincere actors. So they're not safe or pleasant spaces for us to hang out in. So these spaces become lifeless, automated, and devoid of humans, and very dangerous to draw attention to yourself in, leaving very few sincere human creatures left in the dark forest. This is also sometimes called dead internet theory. So this is the idea that all the real humans on the web have died off, and the only thing left are bots talking to each other. So how do we cope with this? So while we're all wandering around this dark forest, most of us realized that we needed to go somewhere safer. So what we end up doing is retreating, primarily to what's being called the cozy web. This is a term coined by Venkatesh Rao in direct response to the dark web theory, where Venkat pointed out that we've all started going underground, as it were. We moved to semi-private spaces, like newsletters and personal websites, where we're less at risk of attack and more likely to encounter real humans. But even those are sometimes a little bit too public. So we retreat even further into gate-kept private chat apps like Slack and Discord and WhatsApp. This is where we all end up spending the vast majority of our time and where we can have real human relationships and express our ideas. We know that things that we say will be taken in good faith, and we can engage in real discussions. But the problem is, none of this is indexed or searchable. We're hiding collective knowledge in private databases that we don't own, and good luck finding anything on Discord. So this is all a bit dark. I do have some good news, though. This might not be a problem. This is going to be only a problem if we want to use the web for very particular purposes, like facilitating genuine human connections and relationships, or pursuing collective sense-making and knowledge building, or grounding our knowledge of the world in reality. So if you don't care about any of these things, do not worry about generative AI. Everything will be fine. We are going to have much more engaging content on social media. But the thing is, I'm quite keen on some of these outcomes. I write on the web a lot. I'm a big proponent of people publishing their own personal knowledge to the web. And I want the web to be a space for collective understanding and knowledge building. But that requires us to find, share, and curate high-quality, reliable, insightful information. And I'm very worried that generative agents and slop threaten that. When I talk to people about my worries, sorry, that shouldn't be crossed out. This is, again, text. When I talk to people about my worries, I always get this question: why does it matter if a generative model made something rather than a human? In most cases, language models have been shown to be more accurate and knowledgeable than your average human. We have benchmarks that prove this. This is at least when it comes to referencing well-documented ideas, anything you could find on Wikipedia. And frankly, they're better writers than a lot of us. So surely, having more generated content on the web might actually make it a more reliable and valuable place for us. And I'm sympathetic to this point, but there are a few key differences between content generated by models versus by humans. The first is its connection to reality. The second is the social context they live within. And finally, their potential for human relationships. I'll go through these each in detail. So first, generated content is different because it has a different relationship to reality than us. We are embodied humans in a shared reality, right, filled with rich, embodied information. And we read each other's accounts of this reality, and we compare it against our own, and then we write our own accounts. And we are all participating in this cycle of trying to make sense of everything together. This is the core of all science and art and literature. And what we've now done is feed that enormous written record into a bunch of large language models, and they've encoded the patterns of it into their neural networks. And this has become a kind of representation of the written record of humanity. And now that model can generate text that's predictably similar to all the text it's seen before. But the tricky bit we have to figure out is how much does that generated text actually relate to reality? Because in some sense, it's fully unhinged, right? Like, the model cannot check its claims against reality because it cannot access reality. It's a bit like a fuzzy memory of reality. It is based off what we've written about the world, but it can't validate its claims. We politely call this hallucination, right? When language models say things that don't reflect reality. I like to say it's like a terribly smart person on some mild drugs, and they're kind of confused about who they are and where they are. And a big part of this limitation is that these models only deal in language. And language is only one small part of how a human understands and processes the world. We perceive and reason and interact with the world through spatial reasoning and embodiment and a sense of time and touch and taste and memory and smell and vision and consciousness. And these are all pre-linguistic. They live in a separate part of the brain. Generating text strings is not the end-all be-all of what it means to be intelligent or human. So fake humans can only deal in language, are missing a really big part of what we perceive as reality. Language models are also different in their social context, in that they have a very strange relationship to our social world. We heard a bit about this from Glenn earlier, that we all inherently understand things like intonation, body language, and reading the room to understand what's appropriate in different social frames. Because everything you and I say is always situated in a social context. For example, everyone here has an unusually high level of technical literacy, and I don't talk to you in the same way that I would talk to my writer friends or my aunt. So every single time we talk to someone else, we intuit how much shared context we have with them, and we adjust what we say based on that. But a language model is not a person with a fixed identity. They know nothing about the cultural context of who they're talking to, and they often will take on different characters depending on how you prompt them, which means they're not speaking from one stable social position. But they weirdly do represent a very particular way of seeing the world, because we trained them, over 95%, primarily of text from the web, which is from a generalized majority English-speaking Western population, who have written a lot on Reddit and lived between about 1900 and 2024. Which in the grand scheme of all history and geography is an incredibly narrow slice of humanity. They obviously do not represent all human cultures and languages and ways of being, and it takes an already dominant way of seeing the world and generates even more content reinforcing that dominance. And lastly, generated content lacks the potential for human relationships. Because when you read something that someone else, a real person, has written online, it's often an invitation to connect with them. You can reply to their work, you can DM them, you can meet them for coffee. Ideally, you could become their friend eventually. I've had this happen with so many people. There is someone on the other side of the work who you can have a full human relationship with. Some of us might argue this is the whole point of writing on the web. So this is a still from the film Her, kind of the canonical reference point for parasocial relationships with AI at this point. And in it, Joaquin Phoenix has a wonderful relationship with his personal AI who lives in his ear. And he talks to her every single day and slowly falls in love with her. But she increasingly grows bored of him because he's not very intelligent. And he becomes increasingly distant from the humans around him. It's sort of this warning sign, this tale of careful, don't become too emotionally attached to things that can't properly love you back. But some people didn't get that this film was a warning instead of a suggestion. And so Replica is one example of this. There's quite a few of these now. It gives you like an AI avatar to talk to and be friends with. And this fails to consider the potentially unfulfilling outcomes of trying to form an emotional relationship with an AI. This is being used extensively both as a friend and obviously a girlfriend chatbot. And it fails to understand that like the replica you talk to won't be able to hug you or come to your birthday party or truly empathize or tell you about their experiences grounded in the real world. So generated content can't facilitate real fulfilling human relationships. So that all sounds quite bad, right? Deep breaths. Sorry, this is supposed to say possible futures. I now want to talk about possible futures. These futures, I say, are like roughly over the next 5 to 10 years. It's hard to make any predictions outside of that. This is also going to be a non-comprehensive list and not mutually exclusive. I think many of these things will happen in parallel. So first, we're about to spend a lot of time thinking about how to pass the reverse Turing test. So how will we prove that we're human on a web filled with fairly sophisticated generative content and agents? In the original Turing test, a human talks to a computer and another human only through text messages with a wall in between them. And if the computer seemed plausibly human, it passed the test. In the original, the computer is the one who has to prove its competency. But on the new web, we are the ones under scrutiny. We have to prove that we're real. This is going to be very challenging on a web filled with sophisticated agents. In the short term, we can employ a bunch of tricks like using unusual jargon and insider terminology that the models haven't been trained on yet. We could write in non-dominant languages that the models don't have as much training data for, like Welsh or Catalan. And we could do higher quality writing with more research and more critical thinking. I apologize for this phrase, but it too perfectly captures the point. I'm not going to tell you what it is, Google it later. But we're about to enter a phase of human centipede epistemology. The point is that if content from models becomes our source of truth, the way that we know things is that a language model once said them. And then they're forever captured in the circular flow of information. So instead of this model, where the training data is at least based on real-world experience, we're going to use the text generated by these models to train new models. and that tenuous link to the real world becomes completely divorced from it. Someone noticed that if you asked AI if you could melt an egg, its AI search summary said yes. And it turned out it was pulling that answer from Quora from a ChatGPT-generated answer. And because Quora is considered a respectable website, it ranked very highly as the first search result. And it's not hard to imagine how all kinds of hallucinated answers could become canonical facts on a web through this kind of ridiculous feedback loop. This phenomenon is especially worrying for the scientific community, and they have good reason to be. We're already seeing evidence that scientific researchers are using language models to help them write papers. One paper published last September included the phrase, "regenerate response" in a paragraph, which used to appear at the end of responses in ChatGPT, suggesting they just kind of copied and pasted the entire page. Another one from last August, published in a policy journal, included the phrase, "as an AI language model." This doesn't mean the science in these papers is completely false, but without understanding how and why ChatGPT was used in their process, we're starting to fear the worst-case scenarios, that whole papers are being generated without rigorous cross-checking. These papers got past reviewers and copy editors and were published in real journals. And there's a real risk of people creating scientific paper mills, using generative models to write papers that claim to find things that haven't actually been tested in the real world, and findings that usually benefit very particular commercial or political interests, which takes the replication crisis to a whole new level. This one seems most obvious. We will retreat further into the cozy web. As the dark forest begins to grow even larger, we will all go underground. We will spend much less time on open public websites as they degrade in quality. And we'll not just use private channels like Discord and WhatsApp to communicate. We'll have to also do a lot more gatekeeping on those channels to keep out bots and automated agents from getting in. Authors will increasingly put quality content behind blocks and paywalls because they'll realize putting it on the open web means it will be scraped by companies building generative models. It's possible that all the best quality writing on the internet could go underground, leaving only poor quality generated material left out in the open. We'll see more websites with masses of content blocking scraping or blocking access to their API, like both Reddit and Twitter did. The web will no longer be open by default. Next, we have the meat space premium, or I like to refer to offline first interactions as meat space. We will start to doubt all people online. The only way to confirm someone's humanity will be to have to meet them in person. Once you do that, and you confirm their humanity, you can also confirm the humanity of everyone else they've met in real life. So two people who know you can both confirm your humanity by a third person. This could have knock-on effects like people wanting to move back to cities, and in-person events like conferences will be preferable. But I think there are obviously disadvantages to this because there are lots of people who can't move to urban areas or get out and meet other people. This could be people with disabilities, people caring for young children, people without the material means to move to a densely populated area. So I think sadly, this could undo a lot of the connective equalizing power of the original web. A natural follow-on for this is like, why don't we just put it on the blockchain? A lot of people have suggested that on-chain authenticity checks for human-created content on the web might fix this. So this means giving a third party a key that verifies your humanity in real life, and they give you this cryptographic key, and then you sign all your published content with it, and it all links back to your identity. This is actually a real project called WorldCoin, where this orb scans your eyeball to confirm your identity, and then it creates a unique human credential that you can use online to scan your content. And actually, this project was affiliated with OpenAI Sam Altman. He was originally on the board. He helped fund it, which suggests he may have kind of seen this problem coming from his own creation. I'm also expecting any day now that Elon will announce a new purple check on Twitter that confirms your humanity. You just pay $30 a month, no verification needed. Just check a box that says I'm human. You get a badge. So those were all a bit negative, but there's obviously some hope in this future. We can certainly fight fire with fire. I think it's reasonable to assume we'll each have a set of personal models and agents helping us filter and manage information on the web. I expect these to be baked into browsers. So I think you will each have a specialized language model that will help identify generated content for you. It could debunk claims, flag misinformation, hunt down sources for you, and curate and suggest high-quality content for you. We might one day find it absurd that anyone would browse like the raw web without their personal agent running interference. In the same way that very few of us would go browse the dark web, we definitely don't want to know what's on it. So the filtered web becomes the default. Okay, I'm almost done here, but the question I want to have everyone leave with is, which of these possible futures would you like to make happen? I don't believe that generative AI is inherently a destructive force, but the way that we're choosing to deploy it in the world is. The product decisions that expand the dark forestness of the web are the problem here. So what should we be building to prevent this? I've tried to come up with 3 principles for building products with language models that will guide us in the right direction. These are to protect human agency, to treat models as tiny reasoning tools and not sources of truth, and to augment our cognitive abilities rather than replacing them. So the generative model system usually starts with a human prompt, right? And it hands it off to an autonomous agent who goes and does a bunch of stuff and then reports back. But the locus of agency here is with the agent. It's making the decisions about what to do. And herein lies the path to self-destruction. This is what almost all AI safety researchers are extremely worried about. A more ideal form of this is that the human and the AI are collaborative partners. They are doing things together in a very short feedback loop, and there's close supervision of every input and output that the model's making. This gives the agent very limited power, and the locus of agency remains with the human. This ties into the second principle, that we should treat models as tiny reasoning tools, not sources of truth. So rather than treating language models as oracles delivering truth to us, we should instead start with our own reliable data sources. This could be databases of scientific papers, our own personal notes, or public databases like Wikipedia. You can then use them to then run language models over them to do very small, specialized tasks like summarize this text, extract claims from this text, find contradictions in this text, group these texts by theme, stage debates between these 2 texts. Language models are actually very good at these sort of small, constrained reasoning tasks where you can observe the input and the output. But then you don't treat the outputs as final publishable material. You treat them as thinking tools in a continuous research process. And lastly, we should augment our cognitive abilities rather than trying to replace them. So language models are very good at some things that humans are not good at, like doing search and discovery through large databases, role-playing different characters, rapidly organizing and synthesizing huge amounts of data, and turning fuzzy inputs into structured outputs. And then humans are very good at some things that language models are bad at, like checking claims against physical reality, long-term memory and coherence, embodied knowledge, understanding social context, and emotional intelligence. So we should use models to do things that we can't do, not things that we can do and that we're quite good at and very happy doing. This should then allow us to leverage the best of both kinds of minds. So a lot of AI researchers use the metaphor of alien minds to describe language models, and aliens always make me think of this, which is quite unappealing as a collaborative partner. But I do like the metaphor of it being a new species. But I prefer this one. Kate Darling wrote this really wonderful book called The New Breed, which is about how she argues that we should be thinking about robots in particular as animals, as companion species who complement our skills. And this is based off the fact we have a very long history of collaboratively working with domesticated animals, both from a legal standpoint and an economic standpoint. And so this is a really good metaphor for us to expand to AI. They are like an animal species that we collaborate with by respecting their unique strengths and our own. So that's all. I want to thank you very much for listening. If you want to see the slides, you can scan that QR code. And then I also have everything on that link, maggieappleton.com/forest-talk. And you can find me on Blue Sky, not Twitter. I suggest you all leave Twitter and get on Blue Sky, much better. No Elon at all. At maggieappleton.com. Thank you.